And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Film Talk Guys.
Welcome to another episode of This Movie Needs More Flavor. I'm Adam.
I'm Josh.
In this episode, we'll be covering the 1982 horror film, Creepshow. Creepshow is directed by George Romero and written by Stephen King. It's an homage to horror comics from the 1950s and is comprised of a prologue and an epilogue with 5 short stories. Those stories include a cruel patriarch murdered by his daughter, a man who plays fast and loose with a strange meteorite, an embittered husband seeking revenge on his wife and her lover, a ravenous oddity sealed away in a crate, and a misanthrope with a bug problem. All right, Josh, let's hear it.
All right. Okay, so I kind of went into a deep dive on my first one here. I was exploring the anthology horror show Connection. Much of this cast appears in other horror anthology series or movies. And I just got a few of them here. I'll start with the minimal one, and that's Hal Holbrook, who plays Henry in the Crate segment. And he was in an episode in the late 90s Outer Limits called The Final Appeal. He was playing a judge, and I think Charlton Heston was also a judge. And they were trying Amanda Plummer. She either used a time machine wrong or she used a time machine, period. I don't quite remember, but that's the gist of it.
For the crime of using a time machine, you're going to jail.
Next up, Fritz Weaver, who plays Dexter, and he played Mr. Hallett in an episode of Monsters. Was Astaroth in Friday the 13th, the series 2-parter. He played Sir Edmund Haley in one of the 2 episodes of Tales from the Dark Side he was in, appeared in a segment of the 80s Twilight Zone called The Star, and was cast in 2 original Twilight Zone episodes as well, Third from the Sun and Obsolete Man. But in my opinion, his absolute finest is as Dr. Mozzie in the Night Gallery episode, A Question of Fear.
Yes, like my favorite episode of Night Gallery altogether.
Yes, and in it, he matches bravery and wits with another Creepshow alum, Leslie Nielsen. If you look back in the early 50s, he earned his anthology chops in shows like Suspense, which was originally a radio show, and Tales of Tomorrow, which was like 1953. The next person we've got up is Adrienne Barbeau, who also has some pretty strong accolades when it comes to anthologies. She plays Billy, and she appeared in an 80s Twilight Zone segment called Teacher's Aide. She was in a Monsters episode called All in a Day's Work. She was like a witch creating love potions. She was also cast in the Romero-directed segment of Two Evil Eyes, and was the DJ voice in both Tales of Halloween and an episode of the recent Shudder incarnation of Creepshow, as well as appearing in another episode of Creepshow entitled Gray Matter, and most recently appearing in American Horror Stories as Verna in an episode, Drive-In. Finally, E.G. Marshall, who appeared in Two Evil Eyes alongside Adrienne Barbeau, so you have that connection. And he starred in an episode of both the 50s and 80s versions of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, was in an episode of Tales from the Dark Side, and plays Jared Soames in one of my favorite segments from the Night Gallery, A Death in the Family.
I didn't know a lot of those connections. I was more familiar with the movies that a lot of these guys were in together. This is like a horror clubhouse. What is it? Adrienne Barbeau, Hal Holbrook, they were both in The Fog. They didn't share any scenes together. Adrienne Barbeau, Tom Atkins, they were also in that. Escape from New York, The Fog, Two Evil Eyes.
The next thing I did was figure out where these rank. Up first, going from the one I like least to the one I like most, is Something to Tide You Over. First thing I want to say about this segment is I don't have anything against it, and I have no real criticisms to offer. I simply prefer the others a little bit more. And having said that, 2 things I appreciate about this segment are The visual effects on Danson and Ross, they're all like bubbly and bloated. And I don't know how they achieved it. I didn't look into it. But how the water just keeps seeping out of them is grotesque.
That is the magic of Tom Savini when he has a budget. In fact, while we're on that, Galen Ross was in another George Romero film, Dawn of the Dead, and she narrowly missed out on becoming a zombie in that one, but she made it this time.
They just seem so waterlogged. Even to the point where I don't know how they achieved it necessarily, but their voices seem waterlogged. They seem like raspy, but watery at the same time. And I like watching Leslie Nielsen's progression from unnerved to completely unhinged. I like him going from they've all gone blub, blub, blub to this manic, hysterical laughter at the end there when he's covered up. Next up would be The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. I'd say this tops Something to Tide You Over solely due to King's absolutely campy-ass performance. I love it. I think it's right on point. Holy old Jesus and meteor shit are two things that get shouted out randomly in my household.
It would have been way too serious if they had tried to play it without the camp, I think.
And it would have been, in doing that, it would have been totally out of touch with the rest of them, even though this is camp overload compared to the rest of them. This is the comic relief. Another thing that I like about it a lot is the black and white canted flash forwards in the doctor's office and up the college. They're so juvenile.
Were you trying to say that there's no Department of Meteors?
Not a cent less than $200. And that also adds to the comic book feel of the movie in general, which is something that I think they played pretty damn impressively. For my second and third, this is where I had the hard time because it's going to be a choice between They're Creeping Up on You and Father's Day. In the end, my third place went to They're Creeping Up on You. And while I like the segment equally to Father's Day, I give it to Father's Day because I can back the characters in Father's Day. I can't back Upton Pratt. Upton Pratt is a son of a bitch who got what he had coming. All right, and end of story. I'm more emotionally invested with the Father's Day characters than with Upton. With Upton, I'm practically rooting for the cockroaches. But I am, in contrast to that, still completely entertained by how vicious that son of a bitch is. His comments are just so cutting, and he's that way to everybody. Even the people that he appreciates, he's still in that same FU mode when he tells that dude that he can take his kids to Disneyland on a fucking welfare check. That slays. I laugh at that every time I hear it. It's a horrible thing to say, but I appreciate him saying it. And of course, another thing I appreciate is, again, the visual effects, and that would be that closing end scene where they all start pouring out of him. It's a little dated, to be sure.
The close-up of the face in particular.
But the cockroaches pouring out of anything is horrible. And you know, if it's anything that Tom Savini creates, it's going to be even worse.
He's worked so much magic. As far as I'm concerned, he gets a pass on certain things, and that's just that.
Okay, so second place goes to Father's Day. As I said, it's just because I'm more invested in the characters, and especially the characters of Aunt Bedelia, Hank, and Sylvia. With Bedelia, I just appreciate her kind of raw nature, and she's gone, and you know, so nothing's held back. And when she's up there bitching out her father's grave, you get this like sense of like betrayal, but you also get the sense of like guilt and regret.
She channeled her personal feelings of family in that scene, and knowing that, it really shows.
Yeah, and that cuts straight to Hank, and you know, it's a complete juxtaposition with his pure camp and his spot on dancing skills.
The finest dancing in the land.
And you know, he rolls out there in his kind of shyly looks around as he takes a little nip off the beam bottle. And of course, the man has a day to move out of the way. It just, no, it's not going to happen. What?
Sounds like a baby.
And finally, Sylvia. We have a coy and yet candid older woman. She's flirtatiously eyeing handsome young Hank, and she nails it. Carrie Nee played Sylvia with such sophistication, it was downright enticing. And regardless of whether I find these characters serious, stupid, or kind of sexy, I love the character, and I don't want that bastard getting his damn cake. So that's why it gets second place, and E.G. Marshall gets stuck with third. And number one is The Crate. And it's number one in my book, main reason, the monster. Not only do I love the look of the monster with how massive in scale it is to what it's being contained in.
You don't know what it is.
Like, what is that and how is it in there?
It's a goblin, ghoul, fluff ball.
Right?
With teeth, sharp teeth.
But what I also love is the idea of the monster. The idea that's been hidden away, dormant for all these years, and it's still just as vicious and just as dangerous. And the fact that this monster is indiscriminate. In the other stories, the characters almost, if not outright, have it coming. But the Crate monster will take anybody who gets too close. And it's up to Holbrook's character to deliver the lush that has it coming. And deliver he does. So just tell it to call you Willie, you bitch. I mean, that is freaking cold-blooded, Hal. That is cold-blooded stuff. But it leaves you with this notion that who's the bad guy? Is it Billy? Is it Henry? Or the monster? And that nuanced notion sets this one apart from the others, which makes it the best.
That is actually an interesting take. The monster, on the surface, you think, it's the bad guy, it's the monster. But he's just hungry. It's everybody else who's miserable.
Mm-hmm. And watching this when I was younger, and in not really having as strong a development in my own character, I was rooting for Henry. But now that I watch it later, I'm like, this weasel needs to step up. I mean, you're a little part to blame for your situation here, Henry.
Right, there are plenty of steps that you missed before you got to, I'm going to have this beast eat my wife that I hate.
Finally, the thing that sells this movie, and really the thing that makes it come together as an anthology, is an absolute seamless nature between the prologue, epilogue, and the stories. It all is woven very well. And I'll admit that seamless nature is one of the things that makes it difficult for me to break these up and choose which one's the best. But it's what makes it such a cohesive story and why this anthology movie stands out among anthology movies.
All right, man. Interesting points. I like how this movie blends horror and black comedy, and it gives it a very ghoulish charm. I'll just say that first and foremost. It's done really well, I think. So the ashtray that is used in the first major segment, Father's Day, I like how it appears in every other segment nonchalantly. It's just kind of blends in. It's a nice little tidbit.
Yeah, I like that. And I like how they don't make mention of it.
Yeah.
Just there for you to, a little Easter egg for you.
In that segment, Father's Day, the father comes to life after Aunt Bedelia spills whiskey on his grave. Whiskey is translated to water of life, and I've heard that it might actually be a nod to the James Joyce book, Finnegan's Wake, where a laborer dies and whiskey's poured over his grave and he comes back to life. Now, if that's a purposeful thing, I don't know. But it's hard to deny that beam, that clear shot of the beam emptying out over the grave, that's funny.
Yeah, and a clear indicator that that's what did it too.
No lightning bolts, no incantations, just a good old Water life. So, the next segment, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. I like at the very end of it, you can see a sign pointing to Stephen King's fictional town of Castle Rock. And I like that it's an in-your-face Easter egg, a nice little throw out to the fans. So Tom Savini, he sought advice from fellow makeup artist Rob Bottin on how to construct an animatronic creature, because he had never covered that before. He's blood, splatter, this and that. So for the segment The Crate, he sought advice there, and like we talked about, fantastic work. It's just so goofy, but formidable looking. It's both. There's a weird duality to this film.
Right? I question, in the right lighting, if that puppet was just some ridiculous trash.
There's a reason why it's so dark. They named the monster Fluffy behind the scenes. And I believe the Creepshow skeleton, the ghoul at the very beginning, I believe they named him Raoul for some reason.
Okay, no backstory, just...
That's what I'd like to know. I do want to go back and talk about Leslie Nielsen and Fritz Weaver, them starring together in this film, although not in the same scenes, but actually starring together in that episode of Night Gallery. Fantastic episode. If anybody's listening who's never seen this show, go watch Night Gallery. Another anthology show from the early 70s from Rod Serling.
That segment is well worth the watch, and the one that follows it in the episode as well is another excellent example of the Night Gallery. I can't talk that show up enough, so I'm going to stop now.
Cheesy goodness. So the janitor in The Crate, poor guy. I kind of wonder if he had just paid enough attention to how dirty those damn walls were in that hallway, because every time I see it, I'm like, holy shit, these things are dirty. If he had paid more attention to those walls instead of chasing quarters, the dude might be alive today.
But he did give me a good line. I mean, fuck a diddle is some solid stuff.
We'll always remember you. For the final segment, They're Creeping Up on You. I will admit, this is my favorite because he deserves it and because it's something everybody can relate to. It's creepy. It's gross.
It's horrible. I mean, but the thing is that the parts that freak me out the most are like the parts when he's realizing he might be eating one ground up in his stuff. It's not like them attacking or anything like that. So the horror is different in that one. And because it's a little more real, I guess, it's a little softer served, I think.
Fair enough. So for that segment, apparently the American Museum of Natural History, they donated a share of live roaches for it. And it's supposedly numbered upwards of 20,000. 20,000 roaches. Son of a bitch. The insects were actually the most expensive part of the film, according to George Romero. They should be like the top billed stars. Roaches.
We gave you 20,000. We expect 20,000 back. That's the situation here.
It's like, how can you guarantee that, though? I mean, there's so many roaches running around. Like, how can you guarantee that none were, like, accidentally stepped on or whatever?
Yeah, some dude just didn't walk in boots, trash the situation.
Holy shit, we're infested. Of course, Upson Pratt, the stereotypical rich person cut off from the world. Everyone, quote, equal to them are seen as wolves. And anyone poorer than them are bugs themselves. How do I fend off the wolves and eliminate the bugs? It's an old trope. Sometimes old tropes don't go out of style. That's one aspect of it. You don't like bugs? There you go, you son of a... But yeah, movie's really all over the place, but it's my jam. I love it. I love the music. I love the direction. I think it was George Romero's most successful film at the theater, but it had a major backing. It would have gone up against Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, but they waited it out, released it after, and it became more successful than that. So their gamble paid off. But yeah, all in all, definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it. And if you have, let us know your thoughts. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, The Film Talk Guys. We also have previous podcast episodes on YouTube with videos added. Like, share, subscribe, and comment if you'd like to add your own flavor to the films we cover. Until next time, take care.